question. Well, it's on the same card anyway, and then somebody brought me another one with the same question. Do you accept people praying for you? The second card here is, when this is over, you're going to have a lot of people praying for you. How does that make you feel?
It's your time. That's about how I feel about it. I mean, you can do what you want. I mean, I know I'm supposed to be thankful, but whatever.
All right, question for both. With the upcoming midterm elections, do you think it's right or fair for candidates to use their religious beliefs or values as a reason to vote for them? Go with Jay first.
Sure. I think that the worldview of a politician is huge because consequences have ideas. That doesn't mean that I think that every Christian politician is the person I vote for. It certainly isn't the equation. Just like picking a surgeon. Just because the person's a Christian doesn't mean I want him operating on me. I want someone who's competent. Does religion bear on a surgeon? Sure. I would prefer not to have an adulterer operate on me. I would prefer not to have a drunk operate on me. But I want someone who is competent. Same thing in the political arena. Their worldview is going to impact how they vote. I mean, that's a no-brainer. And so I would prefer if I could get a Christian, because they're going to have a Judeo-Christian framework, and they're going to legislate and vote out of that framework. But on the other hand, just because someone's Christian does not mean they're a good politician or competent. So you got to look at it's a both-and thing, but it does weigh heavily on it.
Well, I really don't have the choice to vote for atheist candidates because
not many around.
No, I mean, as soon as someone announces that they don't believe in God, it's like your chances are shot. There was actually a Gallup poll that said 53% of Americans would not vote for an atheist in an election, and that is out of, I think they had 6 or 7 different groups, Catholic, woman, a black person, they had all these different things. And, I mean, atheists beat them all out by far. Of course, I wouldn't want someone who I thought was trying to make laws that had no secular purpose. For example, if I thought a candidate might want to put in a blasphemy law, there's no secular purpose for a blasphemy law, which I think they had in Ireland recently. So if I saw a candidate wanted to do that, or who wanted to make as many laws as they can to put their own personal religious beliefs into the law, then that would definitely weigh on that. But as long as I think that someone has ideas that match up with mine, I'll vote for them.
Just as a response, the reason it's so important to me is because when it comes to issues like abortion or gay marriage, I am looking for someone who does have an agenda that's similar to mine. Having said that, reading Christopher Hitchens' book, God is Not Great, he's pro-life as an atheist. And so, if he was running for office and I had a pro-abortion Republican and Christopher Hitchens, I'd probably vote for Hitchens. So I am looking for someone that shares moral values as much as I'm looking for someone that shares a common worldview. Again, it's not just a simple one-issue thing.
That's a perfect example of there are no rules for if you're an atheist, you have to believe this.
All right. Next question for Pastor Jay. As a Christian, I think you believe in the Bible as the inspired Word of God. However, it is still written by men who are imperfect. Studies have shown that there are many different versions of the Bible based on translation and error. Isn't it possible that some of the stories were added by men alone? How do you reconcile that if you have a somewhat literal interpretation of the Bible, as it sounds like you do? Get all that?
Yeah, that's a huge question.
All right.
Is it possible people inserted stories? Sure. Again, you're back to looking at the preponderance of the evidence. Let me just zero this point because it's such a broad question. Let me just go down to the Gospels for a second. Why do I accept the Gospels as historically credible? And there are a number of reasons. I hope this provides just kind of a microcosm answer, but you can't really comment on the whole canon of Scripture and why you believe it. But just take the Gospel. Let me give you just a couple reasons why I believe the Gospels are credible and they're not just fictitious. In fact, I was reading Dawkins yesterday and happened to find a section. I've read The God Delusion. I've all marked up. But I found a section where he said, no reputable New Testament scholar believes that the Gospels are credible. And that's just crazy. Okay? There are rational atheists, and then there are those that are just angry on a jihad, and that's Dawkins. Christopher Hitchens is much more level-headed if you want to read a good book by an atheist. But that is not accurate. I mean, I'm sitting there looking at Dawkins' statement thinking, I can, off the top of my head, think of 24 New Testament scholars with very good academic doctorates from world-class universities who all believe that the New Testament documents are credible. A couple of reasons why I do. One, because there's very early evidence in the Church Fathers that the four Gospels were around before the first century was over. Number two, therefore, the time gap between when Jesus and the apostles were around and when the documents were written is a very short time gap. Number three, the sheer number of New Testament manuscripts we have is enormous. If you look at, for example, Homer, the Iliad or the Odyssey, you have a few hundred manuscripts, and the ones we have today are at least 1,000 years removed from when Homer wrote. We don't have anything any older. When you look at the New Testament, you have manuscripts, Greek manuscripts, that are within 100 or 150 years of when the actual was written. The time gap is shorter, the number of manuscripts is more, the Church Fathers quoting them, and you have the sheer credibility of what's recorded again and again and again. You have archaeological details that are affirmed over and over again. Having tramped around in Israel a number of times myself, it is just astounding that things are exactly where they're specified in the New Testament. I mean, just this morning, as I'm preparing for my sermon, I'm flipping around somewhere in 2 Timothy, I don't remember where it was, and I noticed it said, Paul left so-and-so in Miletus. Well, that wouldn't have meant anything to me except that 2 weeks ago, I was in Miletus, Turkey. And it just resonated. That makes sense because he's writing to Timothy, who's in Ephesus, that's 30 miles away. That all makes sense geographically. You find it over and over and over again. Again, you can't prove it, but every time you check it, it's historically accurate and credible. That's why I put my faith in it.
You know, I know there's a lot of controversy over maybe not whether Jesus existed. I've heard there is some controversy over that, but it's mostly within atheist circles. But the controversy is more over not whether he existed in those places, could have been there, and those people existed, but whether the events actually happened as the people thought they did. You know, there were a lot of people in the Middle Ages who were convinced that their neighbors turned into witches and walked around with cats in their backyard at night. You know, so this is not my area of extensive knowledge, but I know there is some controversy about that, which I know you acknowledge that it's not for certain.
I had a follow-up question. We talked a little earlier about morality and conscience, and there have been several people that asked, what's the difference between humans and animals with respect to that? Why do humans have conscience or do altruistic things, and we don't observe that in animals?
Oh, I wish I had noted this when I heard it or read it. There was a story about, I can't even remember what animal, if it was a species of ape or what, but there have been examples of animals doing things that appear to be altruistic. Basically, we are a highly, highly developed society. You know, our mental capacity is so high above other animals that we're operating much more above the instinct level than they are. So it's just based on our mental capacity. But it has been observed in some of the smarter animals, a certain amount of altruism. And I'm sorry, I can't give you a source on that, but you might be able to find it if you Google it.
That's true. I've seen it in elephants. Guy was explaining that this year in Kenya. The difference between animals and humans, I think it boils down to Genesis 1. We're in the image of God and animals aren't. And that has huge implications in my worldview. I have an uncle who's an atheist, and I had a long talk with him one day. He teaches at Kent State. And we got into it. It was a friendly conversation one time, but I pressed him. Why was it wrong for the Nazis to exterminate Jews in the ovens of Auschwitz? And all he would say back to me is, if I have to explain that to you, you're I don't know what he called me, but something, you're an idiot. You don't get it. And I said, well, no, I'm not asking. I do get it. I believe it's wrong. Why? Why is it okay for me to go out and shoot a deer and not my neighbor? I mean, you might say, well, the laws, prevail. Okay, that's true. It's illegal. That doesn't necessarily mean it's immoral. Is it immoral to shoot your neighbor? I believe it is. Is it immoral to shoot a deer? No, they're delicious. And I think I have a theological reason in the woods why it's okay to aim my .30-06 at a deer and blow it away and not blow my neighbor away, because my neighbor is in the image of God, and therefore I can't kill him. In fact, that is why we have a death penalty. According to Genesis 9:6, the death penalty was put in because of the value of human life. God says if you take a life, you have to give a life. That's how valuable life is. And so that is why I see a huge difference between animal life and human life.
All right, we're going to jump into a couple more science questions, I think. For Pastor Jay, do you believe in microevolution?
I believe in microevolution, sure. Hillary, great example. Shih Tzus versus, what did you say? Wolves. The dog kind, as you look at it, goes all over the map. But, as many geneticists have pointed out, that I've read, you can't get past a certain genetic barrier. You still have a dog. Now, some of them are beyond the species barriers because you can't breed anymore. But St. Bernards to Dachshunds, to Chihuahuas, to wolves, you don't have a cat. And I believe because of that, you can't go any further. I don't know. Some of them.